Vengeance is like a fire. The more it devours, the hungrier it gets.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Pod and Deliver. We have return guest Jacob Gerhardt. Jacob, how are you?
Good, thank you. How are you?
I'm pretty good. How are you doing, Jake? There's two Jakes in the room.
Yeah, isn't there a movie called Two Jakes? Have we talked? Have we said this before? I think we've said this before. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm fine, Ruben.
cool.
I'm sorry.
It's all right. It's okay. We started early, everybody. We started with the shenanigans early. Today we're talking about a book. The book's title, Disgrace, written by, and by the way, Mr. Gerhardt, we have trouble you and I have had trouble pronouncing his name, right? You'll never have a problem pronouncing his name again. You'll see why. It's rhymed with Coetzee, except that it's a Z instead of a C. It's like he could see, but it's Coetzee. You'll never have trouble pronouncing it again, I don't think, if you look at it like that. Because I did too. I was like, I keep struggling with his name. So JM Coetzee, JM Coetzee. He's written books. Oh, this book is titled Disgrace. And Coetzee is one of those guys that I always read about, in the LA Times book review section. He's written books like, he's won a ton of awards, big awards like the Nobel Prize for books like The Life and Times of Michael Kay, Diary of a Bad Year, and Disgrace. And it's a novel about a professor. I'm gonna let you take it away right now, Mr. Gerhardt, and talk about what ideas and what this book means to you, what it did for you. But it is a book about a professor of literature as he navigates through, I would say, 3 different relationships: a lover, and in the parlance of our times, a lady of the evening named Soraya, a student of his named Melanie, and his daughter Lucy. And I have to say, this guy is one of a kind. He's, in my opinion, addicted to sex, no self-perception to the point of narcissism, and he's a lover of women, as maybe we all are in a way, right? But he doesn't have feeling for them. I'm going to leave it alone for now. What are your thoughts about this novel? And boy, what did you do in telling us about this novel? I mean, I could not put it down, and it's kind of stirring. It kind of shook me up. What's your take, Mr. Gerhardt?
Well, your perceptions are it's one perception of the novel. And then, of course, we also have this time in South Africa, a country of which we're aware, but we really can't know that much about. And there's really, I think of it as 2 parts: the part where he's the professor, and then the part where he is lost. He's a wanderer. He's aimless. And when he moves out to the country, and the writing, it's a small novel. It's not thick. And I've read it numerous times to the point where I have 2 copies. This one is the copy that I don't know why everyone isn't like this, because it's a great cover with that dog.
Oh yeah.
And then this just plain very small, Disgrace, and then of course you have the Nobel Prize. He's an introvert, right? He's a man. I mean, he studies Byron. He's writing an opera of Byron toward the end of his life in Italy. Very esoteric topic. But he is a man, I think he's a man who has not changed with the times, but also was never a part of the times, right? So he wasn't a bad guy in terms of being a part of the evil system of South Africa. He just lived there, and he did his studies, as far as we know. The book opens up right at the point where he has the prostitute. The first line sums it all up, right? It's a great beginning to the novel. And then within, I think, the second chapter or the third chapter, he's kind of seducing, maybe you could say stalking, a student. in a way that may have at one time been acceptable in academia. I've heard stories that it was, because the young girl is an adult, but he absolutely takes advantage of her. It's almost as if he's looking for someone that he can control and seduce in that way. And then he's disgraced at the university. I'm going to give a little summary, right? In my view, he's disgraced at the university. He does not fight any of the charges. It's actually humorous in a way when he is at, when his colleagues for years, people who worked with this man, are telling him, just say you're sorry, just apologize, just do this and just do that, and then we'll be okay. And he says, no, he's willing to accept the end of all of it, even his pension. And then he moves out into the country where his daughter Lucy lives. And it's another world. It's another planet. It's another place. And it's not Cape Town, that's for sure. And some horrible things happen out there. Yeah.
And I'm going to go to you right now, Jacob Aguilar, but let's go back for a moment with his relationship with Melanie, the student. So you said the academic, the administrators were asking him, we're calling him to the carpet for this. And then a friend of his, I guess you said, right, asked, just apologize. We just want something from you. There's a moment in that, there's a part there in the book where you're not, and I don't have the quote down, but this is what separates, I think, Coetzee as an artist. There's a moment where you're not sure. It wasn't exactly an assault, but it wasn't consent either. You guys remember that? I think it was the second time they met up. She just needed needed a professor. She needed I wouldn't say a friend, she just needed a place to stay. And you walk away thinking, whoa, this is really rough stuff here. And that he kind of crossed another line, because the first line was bad enough, professor, student, and he chased it. You're right, he stalked it. The second one was another line I felt like he crossed. I mean, what's your take on that?
Well, for me, Ruben, I would say that I'll be honest with you, I almost put the book away after this situation. And I really thought, Jake, what is Jake having us read? None of this is good. I don't like this guy. He's not a likable character. And looking back at the end of the book, I thought, wait a minute, I'm going to go back to that first piece and think about that relationship. And I thought there was nothing. First, I thought, well, it's like a he said, she said. And I said, no. He was definitely stalking, like you said, Ruben, and he was definitely taking advantage of his position, and it made me, it's like an ugly piece. And then, but the writing is so beautiful. And then he goes to the next place where they're, like you said, Jake, in the farm with his daughter Lucy, and then there's another piece there. But I mean, another situation that you really learn about his character even more. But yeah, that first section, Ruben, I was really disturbed by it, and I just didn't like him at all. He was not a likable guy.
Well, by the way, I don't, and we might look at it in three different ways. I guess I look at the book, and you're more of the expert on this, Mr. Gerhardt, than I am. I look at the book as three sections. I think the Melanie is the second section. And then the third section would be Lucy, his daughter. I feel like it's a book about relationships, but again, I've read it only once. The first section to me was Soraya, the prostitute. And that's very revealing in and of itself, because he intruded in her personal life. He, in a way, stalked her as well and demeaned her in a different way, because they were having, consensual sex very clearly, but he went into her personal life. I mean, what do you say to that, Gerhardt?
I mean, it's for lack of a better word, you use the word, that part with Melanie was ugly. It's an ugly book. What happens is ugly. It's not a pleasant situation. People are now the thing is, David has control over those things. So the places where David has a position of power, he abuses the power, right? He knows what he can get away with, and he does it. And he could have gotten away with the Melanie thing, at least financially. You know, he taught long enough where they could say, look, you can be a what do they call it? A professor emeritus. I don't know if they got to that point, but he could have survived that. And then he says enough. And then he goes out when he's out in the country and those evil things are happening to him, the power he doesn't have, and he is suddenly being taken advantage of. He is suddenly the one who's being abused. He's suddenly the defeated.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, the entire book, it's hard to really put it all down because the style of writing is so easy and so fluid, and it reads so simply in a way with these profound ideas. And
Jake,
it you know, and as you're reading it, you're thinking, gosh, I want to see what happens, but this is terrible, you know.
Can I ask you a question, Jake?
Yeah.
I mean, you mentioned these. Now we're talking about themes now, power, and part of me thought this was. If you didn't tell me a man wrote this, I might think a woman wrote it, because of the issues of power and lack of power of women. And you know, the whole scene where there's a rape scene, and then there's just the way that the daughter doesn't believe the father really understands her, because the way I think because of how he treats women, right? And she knows it. She knows her dad. And so I thought, I mean, in a way, I thought this could have been, I mean, a feminist book. I mean, I don't know. I just felt like this could have been written by a woman. I'm not sure how you feel.
Yeah, I agree. And like you said, where, you know, Lucy understands him. We don't know what it is. It's not written, but we know that he was a bad father, right? We know that he was a bad husband. We know that. You know, later on when he meets with his wife, she's like, what are you doing now? What did you do this time? This is what I heard about you. And she said something, you know, I was with you for 10 years. I know you. And so Lucy knows him. And she's like, look, I have my life. Thank you. But also Lucy is a part of this. I really think it is a South African novel, right? I mean, this was a time of incredible and immediate change after generations of wrongdoing. And in the other books that I've read, I read some of his autobiography, Youth, and it was a terrible place. It was a horrible place. South Africa was terrible. And terrible places make people worse. All right. I really believe that. I think, you know, I'm reading another novel I'm reading a history about the American Revolution, and the anti-slavery people in the North were like, you are bad in the South. Slavery is going to make you bad, and it's going to make you lazy. It's going to make you this way. And you see South Africa as this place that it's just without saying has abused people. And Lucy is like, the times have changed.
Well, isn't that the message though? In a way, one of his themes is like, you know what? Many generations we've treated the Africans this way, and now we're going to show you how if a white person's treated this way, in an ugly way, and it's kind of like, this is what's been going on in Africa and South Africa for many generations, but now we're seeing it through a white woman's going through it, and in a way she kind of understands it. It's like, here, she even uses the word tax. It's a tax. It's like, you know, I'm gonna, you know, she understands the history, and it's like, well, maybe I deserve it, because of all this ugliness that's happened to people down here, of Africans, you know, that have been treated ugly for you know, for really centuries. So
yeah, and we should mention Petrus, the man who works for her and with her, is working hard and slowly going to take over. He's going to buy more and more land. That seems to be the idea. But she needs him to run the farm. They work together, and there's no doubt that he is involved in the attack and the rape and the theft. And then later on, when he goes back to Cape Town, later on in the book, he goes to his apartment, and it's been, he uses the term, it's described as being raided. You know, everything is gone. They took his CDs. He wonders, where's Beethoven now? In a pile of rubbish. They took his food. And, you know, you know, this is the way it's going to be. And it's not a place. He doesn't call the police and say, my apartment has been ransacked. Are we going to find this stuff? It is just over. It's
Part of me
different.
thinks Petrus is involved in it a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to think that, right? Like, oh, he's
Right.
here. But
There's-
yeah, it's just remarkable.
His relationship with his daughter is so weird. She calls him by his first name. There's this cold. I feel like she doesn't have a father, but a professor, and in the sense that he just talks at her, and he doesn't want to be there to support. It's a very cold kind of thing going on between them. That I guess this is how I view it. It's like these three different women. He never learns from them. He just talks at them, or looks at them as objects. And you know, it's very contemporary in a way, because he takes on the role of the martyr. Going back to what you were saying when he was asked to apologize, he's very much the martyr, and you can even look at it in the lens of cancel culture. He takes that victim mentality. Like I think he even mentions Mao and a struggle session of some type, as if he is that victim, and he doesn't see it. Melanie is that the student that he. What an inch! By the way, that character of Melanie, it's very mysterious, right? She never really says much. You walk away wanting more from her, but if he's such an artist, Coetzee, he leaves it to you to interpret her, doesn't he?
Yeah, I think that he does, but I feel like that's the in a way I kind of compared her to Lucy in a way, like regarding Lucy felt like she had to pay a tax for what happened to her, right? Regarding the rape. And so I think Melanie felt like, well, you know what? I went through all this and my taxes, spending this time with this guy, but there's a scene where she expects a little like help regarding her grade and some classes she missed. And I felt like she felt like, in a way, the way she was behaving, because right after that, he said, no, you have to take the test. And right after that, she turns them in, right? And, you know, sometimes students get upset, this is a classic situation where this young person or young person will go back and try to, get back at that person the older person who did them wrong. Correct. And so I think she was doing him wrong, in my opinion here now, and that she paid the tax. She slept with him, and now
tax. Did you say she paid the tax?
She paid the tax. Like Lucy felt like she was paying a tax when she was trying to figure out why this happened to her, right? And she was just, not that this is true or that this is, but she was trying to make it make sense. And maybe Mallory was trying to make, hey, you know what? I did this thing with him. I should get a little freebie here. I should get some good grades. I should get a pass on the test. And once he said no, she turned him in. That's how I saw it. I'm not sure.
Yeah, and then there
Jake.
was that there was a boy who was a friend, and you almost get a sense that he was like, hey, you're being taken advantage of here. This dude he's an asshole.
Yeah.
Because Melanie is written like a little bit of a weaker person, which I think is what David is preying on, right? He's like, I'm not getting the smartest girl in my class to come over to my place and have some wine and then maybe a little hanky panky. I think he was taking advantage of someone who he knew that he could control.
They use the word groomer today, don't they, Jake?
Yeah. And I don't know if he used that, but there were, for this being written in 1993, I think it was 93, there were some extraordinary moments, but it just goes to show that things that happened today, 1999, have been happening before, because in 1998, The Human Stain by Philip Roth was published, which is similar. And it's not, it's a man whose life is ruined.
More racial.
Yeah.
This is kind of like, that's an interesting comparison, that book, because I guess both professors are canceled, But certainly in this case, I wouldn't. I mean, in this case, he deserves to be cast.
Yeah, and in the Human Stain, the professor's a good guy who gets ruined.
Yeah. Right.
But at any rate, yeah, it's there's so many things happening, and Laurie is aware. David Laurie, the protagonist, he's aware of what's happening. Yeah. He knows what's happening. When his daughter is raped, he wants something to happen, and she will not do it. And she's going to have a baby, right? I mean, she's like, I'm going to have a baby. She's like, I'm not doing anything. This has happened. I'm going to continue to live my life here, which is an extraordinary. And, the rest of the people at this, the neighbors are all going around with guns like they're at war. They're driving around carrying shotguns and rifles and things. But it's so bleak too, right?
Mm-hmm. But Jake, don't you think though that the whole situation with her not wanting to do something, it's like daughter like son, like daughter like father, right? The father didn't want to do anything. A friend's telling him, "Hey, you got to speak up for yourself," and then he's telling his daughter, "Hey, you got to speak up to the." I felt like, wow, this is where you see that these two are very similar in a lot of ways.
Yeah,
and she wants to do it her way, and he's very stubborn. He wants to do it his way.
Yeah.
And even though to the reader it might not make sense, like, wait a minute, you just got raped, you just got, but she's like, no, I got to make this make sense to me. And same with him.
Yeah.
This is making sense to me the way I'm doing it. Right.
And she's well aware of how the world is changing. And and I mean, it's just, it sticks to you what happens.
Mr. Gerhardt, you mentioned earlier his ideas, or he's trying to write an opera about Byron. So I want to briefly, because I think there's a subplot here that Byron subplot is important. And I think this is revealing something into his character. His analysis of Wordsworth and Byron are very interesting. So there's a page where he analyzes William Wordsworth. So these are romantic poets. It is very sterile and cold. Like if Wordsworth were around, he would reject that analysis of him. It's anything but romantic. And when he analyzes Byron, so it's really interesting because he does both. There are pages where there's analysis. One in terms of a lecture he gives, and there's a page on Byron. Now here, Byron was one of the great poets. And here's a man who died for Greek freedom, right? And there's a line where he says, this is the place in Italy where Byron walked, the shores, where he lifted up the skirt of a young 18-year-old who was the bride of another. I thought, whoa, what an insight to this man, this professor. This is what he's talking about? I really thought this is a man who's addicted to sex, and this is the framework of his life, the lens of his life. That's how he looks at, that's what he's looking through. I thought that was very interesting part of the book, insight into his character.
Yeah, I don't know too much about Byron until I read this book. I'm like, wow, is this the kind of character he was? And then it's no wonder why this guy, David, is attracted to his character in a way. Like he sees a lot of similarities. Am I right?
You could talk about 1,000 other things about Byron.
Okay.
Before that.
Gotcha.
In my opinion. I mean, any other ideas with that, Mr. Gerhardt?
No, I mean, I do know that he is a serious academic. So when he knows all of this stuff, that's like part of the author Coetzee. I think it's Coetzee. I was looking it up to try to, but at any rate, nobody can pronounce his name, and I've seen him interviewed joking about it.
I really studied this.
Yeah,
it's Coetzee.
But he knows his stuff, and it's interesting. I found it. My mind goes right to, this is somebody who's stuck in the past. This is his escape. He loves this stuff, and that's where he's going. But you're right. He does go to the dark side of Byron.
He does.
Yeah.
Yeah. What?
Now, I want to say, as a teacher, though, Ruben, I was putting, lens. He's in his mid-50s, and there's a part of the book when he's with his daughter, he's treated like an old man. Like he's already, all of a sudden he aged like 20 years. And even the way she sees him and some other people, and he feels it, especially after the rape and he got beat up, right? He's feeling a little weak. And I thought, man, I'm his age. And I thought, wow, what can I learn as a teacher here? Obviously, to continue to look at your students, give them humanity, love, and treat them properly, right? And so, but I'm nothing like that guy, and I'm at his age. But wow, I mean, there are people. You mentioned it at that time, Jake. There were professors who did things like that. I mean, I think we've heard that. And even when I was a kid, I heard of teachers acting inappropriately. Today in 2023, you see it in the news all the time, and you're not surprised. But gosh, go back 30 years, it was happening back then. And so, I think it has to be taken seriously how we treat our students, of course.
And Jake, that is a really great point about him aging, because you're right. Out in the farm, he's moping around like a 70-year-old man. And in the beginning, when he's 50 something, but he's going around like 40, like he's a young guy. You get this feeling, and without ever being written, you feel that from one chapter to the next, this man has aged 30 years. You feel it. You can understand that he's moving at a slower pace. He's not sure what's coming down the road, except for the end. And he writes about it. He says something, in his thought, thinking like, this is what I have to look forward to, going to the supermarket, having a lunch, and then just waiting for dinner at the end of the day. That's what I have left. No joy, right? He's not going to be a grandfather, even though he's going to be a grandfather. Lucy is going to have a child. And there's nothing of him thinking, wow, I want to hang on to my best health so I can play ball with the kid. It's just like, this is what it's going to be. He knows he's going to be lonely, and his wife says toward the end, she says, when you're sick of bread and jam, call me up. I'll give you a home cooked meal. Like, she knows this is what he's going to be doing. And it's pathetic.
There's a moment where, and you're right, it's so sad. I mean, I could see people reading this and saying, what did you do to me?
Yeah.
It said to you, because it's so sad and dark at times. But there's a moment where he goes back to Melanie's house, and the parents take him in and make him a meal. And he says, we could have worked, your daughter and I, despite our ages, except that I wasn't lyrical enough, or something to that effect. I love too much, or I managed to love too well. And I thought, this man, what is wrong with him? But he finally apologizes.
Yeah.
And
well, I have it right here. I am sunk into a state of disgrace from which it will not be easy to lift myself. It is not a punishment I have refused. I do not murmur against it. On the contrary, I am living it out from day to day, trying to accept disgrace as my state of being. After Isaac says, are you sorry? And then he says, okay, you finally said you're sorry. And he says, and then Isaac says, the question is, what have you learned? I don't want to hear that you're sorry. What have you learned? And that's what he said. I'm going to, is that enough for God? Do you think, that I live in disgrace without term? And so he's for all of his behaviors in the beginning that are bad, the rest of the way, he's getting kicked. Life is kicking him right in the teeth. I mean, the rapist put him on fire. They put a lighter fluid on him and lit the match. They tried to murder him.
Yeah.
There's so many moments in this book that we didn't really go into detail about.
Right.
That.
Yeah.
But isn't that interesting, Gerhardt? This character, Isaac's, Melanie's father, he's sort of the other side of Lurie, right? David, is it Lurie?
Yeah.
He's the good man who has sympathy for this guy. Empathy. He's saying, what have you learned? can you improve in your, like, he's actually curious about him and wanting the best for this guy.
Yep.
Won't you say he forgave him by having him have dinner at his home? In a way, I felt like he was saying, you know what, I want to be a better man by having you here and showing you that. Because I'm not sure if I would have him at my home.
Yeah.
I would want to kill him if it was my daughter.
Isn't he like the Jesus character? If
He was doing things like, wow, it was
Yeah,
amazing.
I mean, there's no, he writes him, Isaac is a Christian. And he, they pray before the dinner and they hold hands. They do not drink. Lori immediately is like, ugh, why did I bring wine? What was I thinking? And they open up the wine and they give him a glass and nobody else takes any.
They don't even have a whole corkscrew, right?
Yeah, he goes there and Isaac's opens his house and says, you can eat with me. And Isaac's or Lori is not, he's looking at the girl and saying, gosh, she's going to be the real beauty. And even when he looks at the mother, who's overweight at this point and older, he's like, wow, she would have been something when she was younger. But it's a really good point because in a sense, guys like Lori look down upon people like Isaac's very often, kind of in America, like it would be more of an elitist thing. And in South Africa, it's all race, but the kind of the elitist idea of like, I'm a professor. I don't believe in God. You're what's wrong with you praying? Come on. And you kind of look at that little part, Isaac has 2 children who love him. He has a job in which he's exceedingly respected. Right. And he has a wife that loves him. And right after that dinner, that's when David goes back to his apartment or his house, and it's been ransacked. Like you can't put it any better. He goes back and everything and his stuff is gone. They even stole his food. And so you get this being in a house where there is love to going back to his house and he calls it booty. He calls it booty, his things. Let's listen to this. No ordinary burglary. A raiding party moved in, cleaning out the site, retreating laden with bags, boxes, and suitcases. Booty. War reparations. Another incident in the great campaign of redistribution. And, just going from that house with love to his lonely, ransacked place that he has nothing to do, he can't do anything with it but sell it. And possibly without his pension, hope that the money lasts until he's put in a hole.
Wow. Very dark.
Yeah, very dark. It's not a laughathon.
It's
only
interesting.
220 pages.
A couple of things, Jake. I think was his second book he wrote, and then like 4 years after it was written, he got the the Pulitzer Prize for it. I wonder if people were like, wait, they must have had discussions on this book on is it qualify for it? But then it does. I mean, like I think Ruben shared he read it in a day or two because you just can't stop reading it. It's just so good.
Yeah, no, he's written a lot of books. I think this is like his 10th.
Oh, was it his 10th? Okay.
Yeah, but some of them were not, like it was kind of the thing. I think Waiting for the Barbarians was the one that really got him on, but I think that came out in the 70s. But it's like it's books, like they come out and they're wonderful and they don't sell well. But he obviously by this point was on a roll. And his books are like this. They're written like this. They're not huge, which I love, right? It gets to the point and it's quite a style and they're really beautifully written. Waiting for, it's amazing. It's really amazing. And I think I might read all of his novels this year. Like these 4 I just enjoyed so much. And Disgrace, I've been reading once a year for quite a few years.
Oh wow, okay, that's great.
But it's a quick read, but it feels it can drag on you.
I think I said this off camera, but I read it on my way to DC, and the night before, which was a bad idea before my plane trip because I stayed up to like 2 or 3 in the morning. So it is, above anything else, a page turner, even though you are encountering some darkness. Not as dark as our last book that we reviewed. Remember that one, Gerhardt?
Of the dark echoes of the in the darkness.
C. Smith. Jake doesn't
Oh
remember.
yeah, I do remember.
Which one?
That was dark. The
Oh,
killer
the murder. Yeah. Oh God. Yeah.
in your hometown or close to your hometown.
Yeah. But this, you know, it like a great novel, it brings you to a place.
Yeah.
You know, there's a part. If I could read one more part.
Yes.
It's so good. So he's talking with Lucy after the rape, after she's raped, and there's an attempted murder on him, and they steal his truck, they steal anything they can or they want. They murder the dogs, they kill the dogs. And she says to him, what happened to me is purely a private matter. She's not going to go to the police. And then David says, you know, this is my place. And she says something, this is my place. And David says, this place being what? And she says, this place being South Africa. And he says, I don't agree. And he knows that what had happened to her and him was vengeance. It was getting back. It happened because of who they were. Just like other things that happened in South Africa. I'm not saying every single thing, but many things that happen because of who people are and the color of their skin. You don't say it. And he says to her, do you think what happened here to you was an exam? If you come through, you get a diploma in safe conduct in the future? A sign to paint on the door that will make the plague pass you by? That is not how vengeance works, Lucy. And this is, I just love, as soon as I read it, vengeance is like a fire. The more it devours, the hungrier it gets. And she screams at him, stop, David, stop. And so it is bleak, not only what happens to them, but it is bleak what is going to happen in the future. This is going to happen again and again. Your child is going to be put through this. That's what David's saying. And you know, Lucy thinks it happened and it may not happen again. I don't, or, you know, maybe I survived it. You know, we don't know exactly, right? We really only know David's mind, and we can come to other conclusions based upon how they react with David or to David. So that just, you know, vengeance is like fire. I mean, that's frightening, right? You're talking about continued assaults on people and powerful taking from the weak. And, you know, that's, you kill the dogs, you have the guns, you take what you want.
Absolutely. And by the way, because this is a teaching channel, I don't want people to forget, he is a professor. And I guess one thing we could see it as, or analyze, is how you are connected to people, and are you disconnected? And so this is kind of a lesson in that way. It's a whole lot more than, and you and I talked about this, Gerhardt. Obviously, you just talked about vengeance. He is a professor, but it's a whole lot more, and including how he's connected or disconnected in his case to students. And
in a way, I think what Gerhardt's saying though too is that he's disconnected to the history of that place, right?
I know. I just wanted to finish that, and our obligation to our student. But what were you going to say, Jake?
No, I was saying that I think that he doesn't. I think she seems to be more in tune with the history, and she's living amongst the people down there. So when it happens to her, I think there's another layer to it for her at least, and that's why she's trying to figure it out in her head why this happened, and she's dealing with it, and in a way saying, hey, you know what? Maybe this makes it right a little bit because of all the centuries of wrong that we've done to these people. Maybe we need to take our hits here, and there's gonna be more hits, like you said, Gerhardt. There's gonna be it's gonna continue this violence.
Yeah,
Any
You know,
la-
and Lucy doesn't want David around too, right? I mean, we you know, there's no doubt that David has been a bad father. And Lucy's like, I don't need, like there's a classic thing of somebody like, hey, I know you're down and out, but where were you 10 years ago? This is on you. So, you get this sense that she's not going to fall in love with her father all over again, right? There was something lost, and David was not there for it. And she's like, look, this is my life. I'm going to take care of it. But it is, oh my God, it's just horrible. Jeez.
any last words about this book from either Aguilar or Gerhardt you want to just end it on?
I would just say one thing is that, push through that first part, even though I still enjoyed the reading. It was hard. I was even reading some critiques on it that there were some people like, I don't like this guy. And you don't, but you start understanding that, you start reading about all these other layers and these other, plot points regarding, power and feminism and all this there, and even the history of South Africa and the people who were involved in the players in the South. I think that it is so worth just continuing it, because you feel like at the end, okay, I get it, or at least I understand a little bit about that area, because I don't know too much about South Africa, and I felt like I was educated. Yeah.
And then Mr. Gerhardt?
Yeah, I mean, I can't recommend the book more highly. How the story's told, the style that it's written, the matter of fact way it's written, the fact that it goes into some subjects. Really, I mean, it's, the fact that David, his behavior and the way he's so introverted allows you, the reader, to kind of see everything, even if he's not going to get it. Although I think David understands everything. He knows what's going on. He knows what he's done. He knows what has been done. He knows what will be done. But it's bleak. It's bleak. But that's what great literature is, right? It takes you to a place. It makes you, I mean, we could talk about this thing for hours. We could talk about this novel for hours.
For sure.
And that's quite extraordinary as well. That something can, and also it's fun with literature and art is when people look at something and they experience it in a different way.
Yeah, I see why you read it every year, because you probably get something out of it every time you read it.
Right.
Sure.
And and everybody should experience that, and should, take it on and not feel, oh, I can't read this. This is too, because you listen and you watch anything that's on television or listen to music. It's certainly not nice things happening. So, but it's just an extraordinary novel. And I think now that I'm done, I'm going to kind of look up some different reviews, just to kind of see some of the things that I missed. But it was really nice to hear your point of view as well,
Right.
and that, that point, Reuben, with 3 parts of the book, because the prostitute in the beginning is given, she only has a few lines, but that explains him.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then going into the next with his student, and then his daughter. But then also, I'm sure people can just look at this and just talk about South Africa. I'm sure if we had a South African here who was our age, who grew up in this time, they would have a really, really interesting point of view on this. And it's hard when you read something that makes people look bad, or maybe a group look bad, although that's not what it's about, right? You don't read something to say, oh, everybody who's there is bad. That's the most nonsensical thing somebody could take out of something. That's why you have teachers to help children along when they're first reading things. Yeah.
We did review of Mice and Men on this channel, and there is kind of a comparison. If you think about, it isn't all Curly, in a Mice and Men. We also have George, right? There's some light in this book when you think of Isaacs, and I appreciate your analysis and coming on with us again, Jacob Gerhardt.
You bet. Always good to see you guys.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us for an episode. Disgrace. I'm not even gonna try to pronounce his name because I could be right. I think, but
I had the Kindle version. Sorry, guys.
time every.
That's all right.
Bye.